that I am going to be voting against it. And I just wanted to reiterate from the last meeting that this is not a personal issue. It's not a difference of opinion issue. Dr. Dance and I have constructive conversations and meetings about the school system. We're both dedicated to working with the staff and the rest of the board for moving it forward. But I'm not going to vote for it, as I had mentioned before, on principle. The percentage increase of the compensation, including the salary and the deferred compensation, far exceeds any increase that teachers, bus drivers, and other support personnel have received over the years. And it just goes to the continuation of an increased expansion of the administrative budget. I'd also like to say that contracts, employment contracts often are based on performance. And I would say that this compensation package of salary, deferred compensation, retirement, 50 days of vacation, sick and personal time, the car and security and so forth, put this contract at the top value of all superintendents in Maryland. If not the top, it's very close, based on the information that we received. But BCPS is not yet the best in the state of Maryland. We have a ways to go, and we're working at it. And we're committed to working together towards that. But for instance, our facilities are not in the top of the state. With close to 30,000 students without air conditioning, we're actually down at the bottom of the state. Just 2 districts have a great percentage number of their students in that condition. Many are overcrowded and so forth. So that's just another reason that I don't believe this contract is appropriate. And also as to the process, there, in my opinion, was not enough time given to it, and there'll be other remarks that spell that out a little more clearly. But that's my position. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion at this time? If not, I would ask for a roll call vote, please.
Ms. Causey?
No?
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Ms. Eaton?
Yes.
Mr. Gill is absent. Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Miller?
No.
Stewart is not with us tonight. Mr. Yulfelder?
Yes.
Mr. Verge?
Aye.
Ms. Williams?
Yes.
Ms. Walia?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes. All right, so the motion carries. Thank you. Ms. Miller, you had a comment at this time?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Members' comments.
I would like to read a statement, and I'm reading this on behalf of myself and my fellow board member, Kathleen Causey. It is a statement of objection to the process of considering the superintendent's employment contract. As members of the Board of Education of Baltimore County, we make the following objections to the process. Number 1, the board voted on a non-existent contract on May 10th. The board leadership, Chuck McDaniels and Ed Gillis, pushed through a vote on May 10th on the superintendent's contract, even though the details had not been finalized by the board, nor a proposed draft created on which the board could vote. Although the board had until July 1st to produce a signed contract, we were asked to vote blind with only the salary and benefits package determined, but none of the remaining details. Number 2, information requests had not been fully answered. Requests for information from board members, which had been solicited by the board chair, had not been fully answered, nor had the chair attempted to get answers beyond those volunteered by the superintendent. Number 3, insufficient time allotted for deliberation. The board chair controlled the topics we were permitted to discuss at the April 19th closed session meeting, limiting them to salary and benefits. At the May 10th closed session meeting, only 15 minutes was allotted, causing us to reconvene in closed session later and delaying the open session by almost an hour. Members attempting to have discussion regarding possible amendments were rushed until the vote was called prematurely without resolution of contract terms. Number 4, the superintendent attempted to pressure board members during the process. Between the closed and open sessions, the superintendent threatened to refuse to attend the open session meeting on May 10th because the board had not decided upon all the contract details. The decision was made at that time by the board chairman to call the entire board together without reconvening a meeting to express to us the superintendent's dismay. The superintendent was convinced by another board member to acquiesce and attend the open session. Number 5, insufficient legal guidance given to the board. Although requested by the board that the board be represented with specialized legal counsel through the process, that idea was rejected even though the superintendent had hired his own personal negotiator. When questioned on voting on an undrafted contract, the board's legal counsel, Andy Nussbaum, offered no advisement, warning, or counsel regarding the wisdom of such a negotiating practice. Further, when the draft was created by Mr. Nussbaum after the May 10th vote, he took the liberty of picking and choosing what to include in the draft among the items discussed but not voted upon. Number 6, the decision was made without regard to a pending ethics complaint. Despite an ethics complaint having been filed on May 6th against the superintendent, which raised many issues pertinent to the superintendent's employment contract details, the board failed to give time for a review of the complaint or even give sufficient consideration to the issues raised which could be addressed in the employment contract for present and future superintendents. Number 7, poor negotiating tactics protected the superintendent's interest, not the board's. The board gave away all leverage up front by determining the salary and benefits first, while failing to require decisions on any contract requirements on the superintendent before voting for approval 10-2 on May 10th. This precluded the ability to leverage salary or benefits against other requirements important to the board. Ms. Causey and I did all we could do to bring discussion and try to address issues on behalf of the interests of the board, school system, and citizens of the county in the contract approval process. But without the support of a majority of the board, our motions are voted down. The best we can do most times is to shed light on the issues, decisions, and operations of the board. It is to this end that we offer this statement of objection. We ask that this statement be made part of the written public record for this meeting.
Thank you. Mr. Collins?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to explain my yes vote. Going back to my legislative days, after a vote is taken, the members of the committee sometimes, or of the legislative body sometimes, explain their votes. The perception that Mrs. Miller conveyed and that she indicated was supported by Mrs. Causey, our two newest board members, both of whom I have a lot of regard for because they do raise issues for discussion and they work very, very hard and they are well informed. But I think in this case they are just simply wrong. In the 5.5 years that I've been privileged to be on the board, I don't think anyone in the audience or anyone in the viewing public of the small group of citizens that watch the board meetings regularly look upon me as a get-along, go-along member, or as a shrinking violet, or as someone who will not speak up. The process was not perfect. We discussed the contract many times at many meetings in segmented short periods, to be sure, but the reality is there was a great deal of discussion and it became abundantly clear as the process and the discussions moved along exactly where the sentiments of the board members were. That did not mean that we ignored or didn't give time for comment by all board members who chose to comment. The suggestion that that was done by the chair is not accurate. You've heard me say in public, if you want to consult with the previous three chairmen or presidents, as they used to be called, I hollered at them frequently if they tried to shut me up, because that's not something that we do, and it's not something that we have done in this process either. Yes, it was a long time getting here, but we all had copies of the contract delivered to our houses 5 or 6 days ago. We knew exactly what was in the contract. We discussed this evening, which is why we were a little late starting and had only 5 minutes for a snack. Not that chubby people like me need any minutes for a snack, but we discussed amendments proposed by some members and adopted, as a matter of fact, one change and a technical amendment proposed by a member to the contract today. We all know what's there, and we had a philosophical discussion of micromanagement in contract language. We had a discussion just today of many other segments in the contract. And obviously, by the vote, a significant majority of the board is comfortable with the contract. And I think it's the right thing to do. I think some of the items that Mrs. Miller enumerated, while I'm not questioning either her memory or her integrity or her judgment, I didn't see the things that way, the way she saw them. And that's okay, because in a democracy, in a committee, on a board, you can all look at the same information and come to different conclusions. But I just didn't want to not speak and leave the impression in the body politic or the folks here in the room that the board was feeling the way that was expressed by Mrs. Miller and speaking on behalf of herself and Mrs. Causey. I don't presume to speak for any other member of the board, but I just wanted to put the affirmative view out there. Yes, it was not a perfect process. It would have been much better, and I said this even tonight to Kathleen, sitting next to her at dinner. It would have been much better if we had taken a day or two and just had a meeting about the superintendent's contract. We're always rushed. We spend many hours here at our meetings, and we're frequently rushed because there is just so much business that needs to be done. And it's not a perfect system, but we're all volunteers and we all do the best we can. But I think that the process of establishing this contract was done the best we could, and we all know what's in it. And clearly, except for two of us, we agree with it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Speaking of the business we have to complete, we'll move to our next agenda item,